7 years. That's how long it took for Dominic Ashford to forget how to breathe. One glance across a crowded wedding and there she was, the woman who destroyed him. Standing beside her, clutching a stuffed rabbit and wearing a white ribbon in her dark curls, was a little girl with his eyes. The champagne glass in Dominic's hand trembled. Just slightly. Enough that the liquid caught the afternoon sunlight and sent fractured rainbows across his black suit. He didn't notice. Couldn't notice. Because every cell in his body had frozen the moment his gaze locked onto Vivian Calloway's face across the sprawling garden estate. She looked different. Older, yes, 7 years would do that, but there was something else. A hardness around her mouth that hadn't been there before. Shadows beneath those amber eyes he'd once lost himself in. Her chestnut hair, longer now, cascaded over one shoulder in loose waves, and she wore a simple navy dress that probably cost less than the flower arrangements surrounding them. She'd always had that ability. To walk into a room full of diamonds and somehow outshine every piece of jewelry with nothing but her presence. Dominic's jaw clenched. The little girl, she couldn't have been more than 6, tugged on Vivian's dress and Viv bent down, her face transforming into something soft and maternal as she whispered something that made the child giggle. When she straightened, her eyes swept the crowd, cautious, searching. Then she saw him. The color drained from her face so quickly Dominic thought she might faint. Her hand shot out, gripping the child's shoulder, protective, possessive. Fear flickered across her features before she schooled them into careful blankness. But it was too late. He'd already seen everything he needed to see in that split second of unguarded panic. A hand touched his elbow. Vanessa Harrington's perfectly manicured nails pressed into the fabric of his suit jacket, her smile bright and practiced as she leaned close. Her signature perfume, something expensive and cloying, invaded his senses. "Darling, the Worthingtons are asking about our engagement party. I told them we're thinking spring at the plaza, but..." She paused, her blue eyes narrowing as she followed his line of sight. "Dominic? What are you staring at?" He didn't answer. Couldn't form words. Because the little girl had turned toward him now, her face visible in the golden afternoon light, and the world tilted on its axis. Dark hair. High cheekbones. But it was the eyes, deep brown with flecks of gold, framed by thick lashes, that sent his heart into his throat. Those were his mother's eyes. His eyes. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered against the stone terrace, crystal exploding across Italian marble. Conversations around them stuttered to a halt. Heads turned. Vanessa gasped, stepping back as champagne splashed across her silver heels. But Dominic didn't notice any of it. Because across the garden, Vivian had grabbed the little girl's hand and was already turning away, moving toward the exit with quick, desperate steps. Running. Just like she'd done 7 years ago. Have you ever lost someone you thought was your forever? Not to death, that would be easier, cleaner. No, this was worse. This was watching them walk away, knowing they were somewhere in the world, breathing the same air, and choosing every single day not to be with you. That was what Vivian had done to him. And now, impossibly, she was here. With a child who looked exactly like him. Dominic's feet moved before his brain caught up, carrying him down the terrace steps toward the garden path where Vivian had disappeared behind a hedge of white roses. Vanessa called his name, her voice sharp with irritation, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Not when everything he thought he knew about the past 7 years might be a lie. The Ashford Estates gardens were legendary, 20 acres of manicured perfection, every flower chosen for maximum visual impact, every path designed to showcase wealth and taste. Dominic had been to hundreds of events like this. Weddings, galas, charity auctions. All of them blurred together into a monotonous parade of small talk and champagne. But today wasn't supposed to be different. Today was Marcus Webb's wedding, his business partner, one of his oldest friends. Dominic had flown in from Singapore specifically for this. He'd prepared remarks for the toast. He'd even forced himself to smile for photographs with Vanessa, playing the role of the perfect couple for the society pages. He had everything. A company valued at $3 billion. Properties on 4 continents. Respect, influence, power. Everything except the one thing money couldn't buy. The gardens of the Ashford family's Connecticut estate stretched before him like something from a fairy tale. String quartets played Vivaldi near the fountain. Ice sculptures shaped like swans sweated in the June heat. 300 guests in designer clothes sipped vintage champagne and pretended their biggest concerns were portfolio diversification and which Hampton's property to summer in. Dominic hated all of it. He'd hated it for 7 years if he was being honest. Ever since the night Vivian left. The memory surfaced without permission the way it always did. Coming home to their apartment. Their apartment, the one they'd chosen together, where she'd hung those ridiculous curtains with the yellow flowers, and finding it empty. Not just empty of her belongings but stripped. Every photograph gone. Every gift he'd given her vanished. Even the coffee mug she'd used every morning had disappeared, as if she'd never existed at all. No note. No explanation. Just absence where a future had been. He'd called her phone 347 times in the first week. He knew the exact number because he'd counted, because the counting had been the only thing that kept him from going insane. Every call went to voicemail. Every text turned green, undelivered. She'd blocked him. Or changed her number. Or died. He'd actually considered that last option in his darkest moments, that something terrible had happened and he simply didn't know. But his private investigators had found her alive and well 3 months later, living in Portland under her maiden name, working at a small event planning company. She'd simply chosen to leave. Chosen to erase him from her existence as thoroughly as if he'd never mattered at all. So he'd done what any rational person would do. He'd buried himself in work. Built his empire higher. Let his mother set him up with Vanessa Harrington, whose family came from old money and older expectations. Vanessa, who wanted the same things he did, stability, status, a partnership that made sense on paper. Vanessa, who would never devastate him the way Vivian had. Except now Vivian was here, impossibly, at his business partner's wedding. With a child. A little girl who couldn't be more than 6 years old. 7 years since she'd left. The math crashed through his carefully constructed walls like a wrecking ball. Dominic spotted her near the rose garden's edge, partially hidden behind a trellis covered in climbing jasmine. She was crouched down, face level with the little girl, speaking in low, urgent tones. The child's expression was confused, scared even, as Vivian smoothed down her white dress and adjusted the ribbon in her hair with shaking hands. He moved closer, staying in the shadow of a magnolia tree, close enough now to hear fragments of their conversation. Just need to find Grandma Elena and then we'll go, sweetheart. I promise. But Mommy, you said we could stay for cake. You promised. The little girl's voice carried that particular whine of a tired 6-year-old who'd been dragged to a boring adult event. I know, baby. I know I did. But Mommy made a mistake. We shouldn't have come. Is it because of the sad man? Vivian's hands stilled on the ribbon. What sad man? The one staring at us. He looked really, really sad. Like when you cried last week after we watched the movie about the princess. Something cracked in Vivian's expression, a fissure in the careful control. Her eyes closed briefly, and when they opened, they were glassy with unshed tears. Sometimes grown-ups look sad even at happy places. Isla. It's complicated. Isla. The name reverberated through Dominic's chest. Isla. His grandmother's name. The grandmother who'd raised him when his own mother had been too busy building her career. The woman who'd taught him that love wasn't about grand gestures but quiet, consistent presence. Vivian had known that. She'd known how much his grandmother had meant to him. She'd named their daughter, because she had to be his daughter. The resemblance was too striking to be coincidence. After the woman who taught him how to love. The betrayal of it, the intimacy and the cruelty tangled together, nearly brought him to his knees. Dominic stepped out from behind the tree. Vivian saw him and went rigid, her body angling protectively in front of Isla in an instinctive movement that made something primal surge in his chest. Protection. Defense. Fear. She was afraid of him. After everything she'd done, after vanishing from his life without explanation, she was afraid of him? Vivian. His voice came out rougher than intended, scraped raw by 7 years of unanswered questions. She straightened slowly, keeping Isla behind her. Up close the changes were more pronounced. Fine lines at the corners of her eyes. A small scar on her left temple he'd never seen before. Her hands, once soft and elegant, bore the rough patches of someone who worked with them constantly. But her eyes, those amber eyes that had haunted his dreams, were the same. Deep and expressive and currently filled with the kind of terror that made his stomach twist. Dominic. She said his name like a prayer. Or a curse. He couldn't tell which. We were just leaving. Were you going to say hello? Or just run? Again? The words landed like physical blows. She flinched, and he hated himself for the satisfaction it brought. This isn't the place. Then where? He took a step closer and she took one back, her hand reaching behind her to keep Isla in place. 7 years, Vivian. 7 years of nothing. No explanation. No closure. Nothing. And now you show up here with... His eyes dropped to Isla, who was peeking around her mother's legs with open curiosity. The little girl tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that was achingly familiar. He'd seen that exact expression in his own bathroom mirror for 38 years. "Hi," Isla said, her voice bright despite the tension crackling in the air. "You're really tall. Are you a giant?" Despite everything, the anger, the confusion, the betrayal burning in his veins, Dominic felt his lips twitch. Almost a smile. Almost. Not a giant. Just tall. "My mommy says I'm going to be tall too. She says I get it from—" Isla paused, glancing up at Vivian with sudden uncertainty. "From my family. From my family. Not from my father." The careful phrasing wasn't lost on him. Dominic's gaze snapped back to Vivian, and this time he didn't bother hiding the accusation in his voice. "How old is she?" Vivian's throat worked as she swallowed. Her eyes darted around the garden, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. They were partially hidden by the jasmine trellis, but the reception was still in full swing 30 yards away. Running would cause a scene. She knew it. He knew it. "Dominic, please?" "Oh. She. 6. The word came out barely above a whisper. "She just turned 6 last month." The ground seemed to shift beneath his feet. 6 years old. Which meant Vivian had been pregnant when she left. Had known she was carrying his child and still walked away without telling him. The rage that surged through him was unlike anything he'd felt before. White-hot and consuming, burning away the careful control he'd spent 7 years building. "Is she mine?" Vivian's eyes widened. Her mouth opened, then closed. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. And in that silence, Dominic had his answer. "Mommy?" Isla's small voice cut through the tension. What does he mean? Why is he asking that? Vivian seemed to shake herself, her spine straightening as she pulled Isla closer against her legs. When she spoke, her voice was steadier, colder. The warmth he'd heard when she spoke to her daughter had vanished, replaced by something that sounded almost mechanical. "You don't know anything about my life, Dominic. You don't know what I've been through or the choices I've had to make. So whatever you think, whatever conclusions you're jumping to, you're wrong. Then tell me I'm wrong." He stepped closer, near enough now that he could smell her shampoo. Something simple, coconut and vanilla, not the expensive perfume she used to wear. "Look me in the eye and tell me she's not my daughter." Their eyes met. Held. And in that moment, Dominic saw everything. The fear. The guilt. The desperate, aching sadness that mirrored his own. 7 years of it, written in the fine lines around her eyes and the tightness of her jaw. But she didn't say the words. Didn't deny it. "I need to find my mother," Vivian said instead, her voice breaking slightly on the last word. "She's not well. That's why we're here for her. Not for this." She turned, guiding Isla away from him with gentle but firm pressure on the child's shoulders. His daughter. He watched them go, rooted to the spot, his mind reeling. Isla glanced back once over her shoulder, her expression curious and a little confused, before Vivian urged her forward around the corner of the hedge. And just like that they were gone. Again. But this time was different. This time Dominic knew where she was. This time he knew there was a child, his child, whose entire existence had been kept from him. This time he wouldn't let her disappear. The truth she'd buried for 7 years was about to explode. Could it be? Or was his mind playing cruel tricks on him? What would you do if the woman who left you suddenly appeared with a child who looked exactly like you? Sometimes the universe doesn't give us closure. It gives us questions that demand answers we're not ready to hear. Dominic stood in the garden for another moment, his hands curling into fists at his sides. The rational part of his brain, the part that had built a $3 billion empire, was screaming at him to slow down, to think, to not make decisions based on emotion. But the other part, the part that had spent 7 years with a hole in his chest where his heart used to be, didn't care about rationality. He pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. Tommy Reed answered on the second ring. "Please tell me you're not drunk at your own business partner's wedding. I need you to find someone." Dominic's voice was steady now, cold and focused. "Vivian Calloway. I need to know where she's staying, how long she's in town, everything." Pause. Then, "Dom? Just do it, Tommy." He ended the call before his best friend could argue and turned back toward the reception. Toward Vanessa, who would be furious about the scene he'd caused. Toward 300 guests who would be whispering about the great Dominic Ashford losing his composure over spilled champagne. He didn't care about any of it. Because somewhere in this estate was a little girl named Isla who had his eyes, his grandmother's name, and apparently no idea who her father was. And Dominic was going to fix that, even if it destroyed everything he'd built in the 7 years since Vivian Calloway walked out of his life. Vanessa found him near the bar, nursing a scotch and staring at nothing. Her heels clicked against the stone terrace with precise, measured steps. The walk of someone who'd been trained since birth to command attention without demanding it. Everything about Vanessa Harrington was calculated, from her platinum blonde hair styled in a classic chignon to her silver Valentino gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. She was beautiful in the way that old money always was, polished, pristine, untouchable. Nothing like Vivian's natural warmth. Dominic shoved the thought away and drained his scotch. That was quite a performance, Vanessa said, sliding onto the bar stool beside him with the kind of grace that came from years of cotillion and finishing school. She gestured to the bartender for a champagne flute. Throwing your drink like some common. I dropped it. You threw it when you saw that woman. Her blue eyes, cold as Arctic ice, fixed on him. Don't insult my intelligence, Dominic. I know what I saw. The bartender placed a champagne flute in front of Vanessa and discreetly moved to the other end of the bar. Smart man. Dominic set down his empty glass, the crystal making a sharp sound against the marble bar top. It's nothing. Old acquaintance. I was surprised, that's all. Old acquaintance. Vanessa's perfectly glossed lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. How fascinating. Because from where I was standing, you looked like you'd seen a ghost. And not just any ghost, the ghost of someone who actually mattered to you. There was an edge to her voice now, sharp and cutting. Vanessa might play the part of the elegant socialite, but underneath the designer clothes and practiced smiles was a woman who'd been groomed from birth to protect her position at any cost. It's nothing, Dominic repeated, but the words felt hollow even to his own ears. Vanessa took a delicate sip of champagne, her eyes never leaving his face. You know what I love about you, darling? You're usually such an excellent liar. It's one of the things that made me agree to this arrangement in the first place. But right now you're failing spectacularly. Arrangement. He turned to look at her fully. Is that what we're calling it? Oh, don't pretend to be wounded. We both know exactly what this is. She set down her glass and reached for his hand, her skin cool and smooth. We're a perfect match on paper. Your nouveau riche billions and my family's old money pedigree. You get access to the right circles, I get financial security. It's practical. No messy emotions to complicate things. She wasn't wrong. Their engagement had been negotiated like a business deal because that's exactly what it was. His mother had orchestrated the introduction 18 months ago, and Vanessa had made her expectations clear from their first dinner together. A partnership of convenience, mutual benefit, nothing more. He'd agreed because he was tired. Tired of dating women who saw dollar signs instead of a person. Tired of his mother's matchmaking attempts. Tired of feeling like the hollowed-out shell of whoever he used to be before Vivian left. Vanessa offered stability, predictability, safety. Everything Vivian had destroyed. So who is she? Vanessa pressed, her nails digging slightly into his palm. This old acquaintance, who makes you forget we have 300 people watching our every move? Dominic pulled his hand away. Someone from before. It doesn't matter. It clearly matters very much. Especially considering, Vanessa paused, her eyes narrowing as she looked past him toward the garden path. Oh, that's interesting. Dominic followed her gaze and felt his stomach drop. Vivian had emerged from the gardens, Isla's hand clutched tightly in hers. But now there was an older woman with them, rail-thin and moving slowly, leaning heavily on Vivian's arm. Even from this distance, Dominic could see the sallowness of her skin, the way her clothes hung loose on her frame. Elena Calloway. Vivian's mother. He'd met her a handful of times during the 2 years he and Vivian had been together. She'd been vibrant then, full of life and terrible jokes that made Vivian groan and laugh in equal measure. The woman making her way toward the parking area looked like a shadow of that person. She's sick, Dominic heard himself say. Cancer probably. From the look of her. Vanessa's tone was clinical, detached. Terminal, I'd wager. 6 months, maybe less. The casual cruelty of it made his hands clench. You can't possibly know that from looking at her. My aunt died of pancreatic cancer 2 years ago. I recognized the signs. Vanessa finished her champagne and stood, smoothing down her gown. So your old acquaintance has a dying mother and a bastard child. How tragic. Now, can we please get back to our table? The Worthingtons are asking about. Don't call her that. Vanessa blinked. Excuse me? The child. Don't call her that. Something flickered across Vanessa's face, surprise perhaps or calculation. She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Oh, Dominic. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper, soft but laced with poison. "Please tell me that's not your child." He said nothing. Couldn't because he didn't have an answer. Not yet. But Vanessa didn't need confirmation. She could read it in his silence, in the rigid set of his shoulders, in the way his eyes tracked Vivian's progress toward the parking lot. Her laugh was brittle, sharp enough to cut. "Oh, this is rich. This is absolutely—" She pressed her fingers to her temples, her composure cracking for the first time since he'd known her. "Do you have any idea what this could do to both our families? The scandal? My mother would have a stroke. Your board would. I don't care." "Well, you should." Vanessa grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "We're supposed to announce our engagement at the Grayson Gala next month. My family has already sent out invitations. The press has been notified. You can't just—" "I never agreed to that timeline. Your mother did. Don't split hairs with me right now. Whatever mess you have with that woman and her child, you need to handle it quietly and quickly. Pay her off if you have to. Set up a trust fund. Do whatever it takes to make this go away before it ruins everything we've built. Pay her off. Make it go away." As if his daughter, and she was his daughter, he knew it in his bones, was a problem to be solved rather than a person who deserved to know her father. Dominic pulled his arm from Vanessa's grasp and stood. "I'm leaving." "You can't just leave in the middle of Marcus's wedding. What will people—" "I don't care what people think." He was already moving toward the parking lot, his long strides eating up the distance. "Make my excuses. Tell them I'm sick. Tell them whatever you want." "Dominic." He didn't look back. Vivian's car was pulling out of the parking lot when he reached it. An old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and a baby on board sticker that was peeling at the edges. Nothing like the luxury vehicles she used to drive when they were together. He memorized the license plate before it disappeared around the bend. His phone buzzed. "Tommy. Found her. She's staying at the Sunset Inn off Route 7. Checked in 3 days ago under Elena Calloway's name. Economy room, paying cash." "How did you—" "I made some calls. Asked some questions. Dom." Tommy's voice softened. "Is it true? Is the kid yours?" Dominic watched the dust settle where Vivian's car had been, his chest tight. "I don't know yet. But I'm going to find out." "What would you sacrifice to protect your child?" It's a question that haunts every parent, waking them up at 3 in the morning with phantom fears and worst-case scenarios. For Vivian Calloway, that question wasn't theoretical. It was 7 years of her life, compressed into a single impossible choice. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The Sunset Inn was exactly what its cash-paying economy room description suggested. A 2-story building with faded blue paint and a flickering neon sign that read "Vacancy." The parking lot was mostly empty except for a few trucks and Vivian's dented Civic parked in front of room 108. Dominic sat in his Tesla across the street, watching the curtained window for any sign of movement. It was close to 9 now, dark except for the streetlights casting yellow pools across cracked asphalt. He'd been sitting here for 30 minutes trying to figure out what the hell he was going to say. "Hi, I know you left me 7 years ago without explanation, but is that little girl mine? Because if she is, we need to talk about the fact that you've been hiding my daughter from me for her entire life." "Yeah, that would go over well." His phone rang. Tommy again. "Please tell me you're not stalking your ex-girlfriend at a budget motel." "I'm not stalking. I'm observing." That's literally the definition of stalking. "This is a bad idea, Dom. You need to sleep on this. Maybe hire a lawyer before you—" "A lawyer?" Dominic's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "She kept my daughter from me for 6 years, Tommy. 6 years of birthdays and first words and first steps. You think I'm going to handle this through lawyers? I think you're about to do something you'll regret. You're angry. You have every right to be. But showing up at her motel room at 9 o'clock at night? That's not going to end well." Tommy wasn't wrong. He rarely was. It was what made him an excellent COO and an even better friend. He had a talent for seeing the rational path when everyone else was operating on emotion. But rationality had gotten Dominic nowhere for the past 7 years. "I need answers. And you'll get them. Tomorrow. In daylight. When you've had time to cool down and think about what you're going to say." Dominic was about to respond when the door to room 108 opened. Vivian stepped out, wearing jeans and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked younger like this, closer to the woman he remembered, the one who used to steal his t-shirts and make terrible puns while cooking breakfast. She walked to a vending machine near the office, fed in some dollar bills and selected something. A candy bar maybe. When she turned back toward her room, the light from the vending machine caught her face. She was crying. Not the dramatic, sobbing kind of crying. Just tears streaming silently down her face while she clutched whatever she'd bought from the machine like a lifeline. Dominic's anger faltered, replaced by something more complicated. Something that felt uncomfortably like the ache he'd carried for 7 years. "Dom? You still there? I'll call you tomorrow," he said, and ended the call before Tommy could argue. He got out of the car. Vivian didn't notice him approaching until he was 10 feet away. When she looked up and saw him, she actually stumbled backward, her shoulder hitting the vending machine with a metallic thud. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was raw, thick with tears she was trying to hide by wiping at her face with her sleeve. "How did you even? We need to talk." No, we don't. You need to leave. My mother is sleeping and... Is she mine?" The question stopped her cold. She stared at him, her amber eyes wide and wet, her chest rising and falling with quick, shallow breaths. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't do this. Not now. Not like this." "Then when?" He took a step closer, and she pressed herself against the vending machine as if she could merge with it and disappear. 7 years, Vivian. I deserve answers." "You deserve?" She let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything." "Then tell me. Explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, you left me without a word, kept my daughter from me for 6 years, and now you're crying in a parking lot at a budget motel while your mother—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. "Elena's dying. Isn't she?" It wasn't a question. Vivian's composure shattered. She slid down the vending machine until she was sitting on the ground, her knees pulled up to her chest, and the candy bar, a Snickers he could see now, fell forgotten beside her. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer," she said flatly. "Diagnosed 6 months ago. They gave her a year at most. She wanted to see one more family wedding before. Dominic crouched down in front of her, maintaining some distance but close enough to see the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. "I'm sorry. Are you?" She looked up at him, and there was something fierce in her expression despite the tears. "Because you don't sound sorry. You sound angry. Which is fair, I suppose. You have every right to be angry. Is she mine, Vivian?" The silence stretched between them. Somewhere nearby, a truck engine rumbled to life. A dog barked. Normal sounds in a normal world, while Dominic's entire reality hung in the balance of her next words. "Yes," she finally said, so quietly he almost didn't hear it. "Yes. Isla is your daughter." The confirmation hit him like a physical blow, even though he'd known. Had known from the moment he saw Isla's face. But hearing it out loud was different. It made it real in a way that speculation hadn't. "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you just disappear?" "Because I had to." Vivian pushed herself to her feet, using the vending machine for support. "You don't understand. You think you want to know, but you don't. Knowing will only make everything worse." "How could it possibly be worse than this?" She laughed again, that same bitter sound. "You'd be surprised." She turned toward her room, but Dominic caught her wrist, gently, carefully, very aware that she flinched at the contact. "I'm not leaving until you give me answers. Real ones. Not cryptic warnings about how knowing will make things worse. You can't be here when Isla wakes up. She'll have questions I'm not ready to answer. Then talk fast." Vivian looked down at his hand on her wrist, then back up at his face. Something shifted in her expression, a resignation perhaps. Or maybe just exhaustion so profound she didn't have the energy to fight anymore. "Fine." She pulled her wrist free. "But not here. And not tonight. My mother needs me. Tomorrow. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks down. The Rusty Spoon. 9 a.m. I'll tell you everything. Everything? Everything I can." She walked toward her room, paused with her hand on the doorknob. "But Dominic? When you know the truth, you're going to wish you'd stayed away. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed again." She disappeared inside room 108, leaving Dominic standing alone in the parking lot with more questions than he'd started with and a hollow ache in his chest that felt suspiciously like hope. Which, he knew from experience, was the most dangerous thing of all. Tommy was waiting in Dominic's penthouse when he got back, nursing a bourbon and looking distinctly unimpressed. "Breaking and entering is still illegal, you know." Dominic tossed his keys on the entry table and headed for his own bottle of Macallan. "Your doorman knows me. It's not breaking in if you're on the approved list." Tommy swirled his bourbon, ice clinking against crystal. "So, how'd it go?" "She's mine." Dominic poured 3 fingers and drank half of it in one swallow. "Isla. She's my daughter." Shit. Yeah. They sat in silence for a moment, the Manhattan skyline glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows. Dominic's penthouse was all clean lines and expensive furniture, curated by a decorator he'd never met to project exactly the right image of understated wealth. It felt empty. It always had. "What are you going to do?" Tommy asked. "I don't know. She's meeting me tomorrow morning. Says she'll explain everything." "And you believe her? After 7 years of radio silence, she's just going to lay it all out." "No." Dominic finished his scotch and poured another. "But it's a start." Tommy studied him for a long moment, his expression troubled. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "Dom, there's something you should know. About why Vivian left." Dominic's hand stilled on the bottle. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." Tommy ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture he only made when deeply uncomfortable. "Look, I wasn't sure if I should tell you this. I've spent 7 years debating it. But now that she's back, now that there's a kid involved..." "Tommy, what are you talking about?" "The night before Vivian left, I saw her. At the Ashford building. Like, around 11 p.m. Dominic set down his glass slowly. "What was she doing there?" "That's just it, I don't know. I was working late, finishing up the Singapore contracts. I saw her in the parking garage getting into her car. She looked..." Tommy paused, choosing his words carefully. "Destroyed. Like someone had just torn her world apart. Her face was blotchy from crying, and she was shaking so hard she could barely get her keys in the ignition." "Why didn't you tell me this 7 years ago?" "Because you were a mess, Dom. You were barely holding it together. And honestly, I thought maybe she cheated. Maybe she was guilty and couldn't face telling you. It made sense at the time. But now I don't think it was guilt." Tommy leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I think someone told her something. Or threatened her. Because the Vivian I saw that night wasn't running away from you, she was running to protect you." The words settled between them like stones dropping into still water, sending ripples through everything Dominic thought he knew. Who would threaten her? Tommy's expression darkened. "I have a theory. But you're not going to like it." "Tell me." "Vanessa." Dominic laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet apartment. "That's insane. Vanessa didn't even know Vivian existed back then. I didn't meet Vanessa until 18 months ago." "Didn't you?" Tommy stood, walking to the window. "Think about it. Your mother introduced you to Vanessa. But the Harrington and Ashford families have been in the same social circles for decades. You really think Vanessa didn't know who you were? That she wasn't paying attention when the heir to Ashford Industries was dating some middle-class event planner? You're reaching." "Am I?" Vanessa's family was on the verge of bankruptcy 7 years ago. Her father made some catastrophically bad investments. They were about to lose everything, the properties, the reputation, all of it. Then suddenly, miraculously, they didn't. Someone bailed them out. Anonymously. Dominic's mind was racing now, connecting dots he'd never thought to look for. "You think my mother?" "I think your mother has always had very specific ideas about who you should marry. And Vivian Calloway, lovely as she was, didn't fit the picture." Tommy turned from the window. "I can't prove anything. But the timing is suspicious as hell. Vivian disappears. 6 months later, the Harringtons are solvent again. 18 months after that, you're engaged to their daughter. That's a conspiracy theory. Maybe. Or maybe it's the truth you've been too heartbroken to see." Dominic wanted to argue. Wanted to dismiss Tommy's theory as paranoid speculation. But a sick feeling was spreading through his gut, cold and insidious. Because it made sense. His mother, Margaret Ashford, had built her real estate empire through calculated moves and strategic alliances. She treated relationships the same way she treated business deals, with clear expectations and measurable outcomes. She'd never approved of Vivian. Had made that abundantly clear through tight-lipped smiles and pointed questions about future prospects. And Vanessa. Vanessa had always been too perfect. Too willing to accept the terms of their arrangement. Too practiced in the role of the dutiful fiancé. "I need to talk to my mother," Dominic said. "Not tonight. You're angry and drunk and it's past midnight. Whatever happened 7 years ago, confronting your mother right now isn't going to help." Tommy collected his coat from the back of the couch. "Get some sleep. Meet with Vivian tomorrow. You're her side. Then decide what to do." After Tommy left, Dominic stood at the window, looking out over the city that had been his kingdom for 7 years. All those skyscrapers full of people living their lives, making their choices, building their futures. And somewhere out there in a cheap motel room was his daughter. A little girl named Isla who loved stuffed rabbits and asked if he was a giant. A little girl who should have known him, who should have called him dad, who should have had every advantage his wealth could provide. Instead, she was sleeping in a budget motel while her grandmother died and her mother cried alone in parking lots. Because of choices made 7 years ago. Choices he'd had no part in. Choices that had stolen 6 years of his daughter's life from him. The anger that surged through him now was different from what he'd felt at the wedding. This wasn't the hot, impulsive rage of shock and betrayal. This was cold, calculated. The kind of anger that built empires and destroyed enemies. If someone had threatened Vivian, if someone had forced her to leave to hide his daughter from him, then they would pay. He didn't care who it was. He pulled out his phone and sent a single text to his head of security. Need complete background check on Vanessa Harrington. Everything. 7 years back. Financials, communications, associations. Money is no object. I want it by tomorrow afternoon. Then he poured himself one more scotch and settled in to wait for morning. The Rusty Spoon was exactly the kind of place Dominic would never normally enter. A hole-in-the-wall diner with cracked vinyl booths and a laminated menu featuring photos of the food. The coffee was probably terrible. The clientele looked like truckers and night shift workers grabbing breakfast before heading home. Vivian was already there when he arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, sitting in a back corner booth with her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. She'd showered since last night, her hair was damp, pulled back in a simple braid, and she wore jeans and a faded blue sweater that had seen better days. She looked tired. Not just physically tired, but soul-deep exhausted in a way that made him wonder how long she'd been running on empty. He slid into the booth across from her. A waitress appeared immediately, refilled Vivian's mug, and poured one for Dominic without asking. Up close, her name tag read Dottie, and she had the efficient, no-nonsense air of someone who'd been working this shift for 30 years. You kids want breakfast? Dottie asked. Just coffee, Dominic said. Vivian shook her head. I'm fine, thank you. Dottie left with a knowing look that suggested she'd seen plenty of tense conversations in this booth over the years. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside the window, traffic moved sluggishly down Route 7. Morning commuters heading to jobs they probably hated, living lives that probably felt small and constrained. A week ago Dominic would have pitied them. Now he wondered if their simple, uncomplicated lives were actually a blessing. Where's Isla? He finally asked. With my mother. At the motel. She's... Vivian's voice caught. Elena's having a good morning. She wanted to do a puzzle with Isla. Something with butterflies. How long does she have? The doctor said 3 months, maybe 4. But watching her yesterday... Vivian's eyes filled with tears. She blinked away furiously. I don't think she has that long. I'm sorry. Are you? The question wasn't accusatory, just genuinely curious. You met her, what, 5 times? At Sunday dinners I practically had to drag you to because you were always working late. The criticism stung because it was true. He'd been building his empire back then, convinced that success was measured in quarterly earnings and market share. Family dinners with Vivian's middle-class parents had felt like an obligation rather than a privilege. He'd been an ass. Your mother was kind to me, Dominic said carefully. She deserved better than 5 distracted dinners. We all deserved better. Vivian took a sip of her coffee, made a face. God, this is terrible. Why do I keep coming here? Because it's cheap and anonymous and nobody asks questions? She smiled, just a flicker. You know me too well. Or you did once. I want to know you again. I want to know Isla. I want... He stopped, frustrated by how inadequate words were. I want to understand what happened. Why you left. Why you kept her from me. Because I was protecting her. From what? From me? The hurt in his voice was impossible to hide. No. Never from you. Vivian set down her mug and looked directly at him, and the anguish in her amber eyes made his chest constrict. From the monster who would have destroyed all of us if I'd stayed. What are you talking about? She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she wrapped them back around her mug for warmth or comfort or both. The night before I left I got a call. Around 10 p.m. You were still at the office. You were always at the office back then. A woman's voice I didn't recognize. She said she had information I needed to hear. About you. About us. Dominic's jaw clenched. What kind of information? She told me to meet her in your building's parking garage. Level B3, the back corner where the security cameras had blind spots. Vivian's voice had gone flat, reciting facts to keep emotion at bay. I thought it was insane. I almost didn't go. But something in her voice. Who was it? I didn't know then. She was wearing a scarf and sunglasses even though it was night. But I know now. Vivian met his eyes. It was Vanessa Harrington. The world tilted. Dominic's hand clenched around his coffee mug so hard he was surprised it didn't shatter. That's impossible. I didn't even know Vanessa 7 years ago. Didn't you? Or did you just not notice her? Vivian's smile was bitter. She showed me photos, Dominic. Photos of you with other women. Dozens of them. At business dinners, charity galas, conferences. All time stamped from the 6 months we'd been together. I never cheated on you. Not once. Those were business. I know that now. But that night she was very convincing. She had dates, times, hotel receipts. She told me you'd been using me as a cover while you dated women more appropriate to your status. That you were planning to dump me as soon as your mother found you a suitable wife. And you believed her? The words came out harsher than he intended. Vivian flinched. No, not at first. I told her she was crazy, that you loved me, that we were planning a future together. That's when she showed me the real weapon. What weapon? My mother's medical bills. The breath left Dominic's lungs. Elena had been diagnosed with breast cancer 2 months before. Stage 2. Treatable but expensive. I'd been trying to figure out how to pay for it, juggling credit cards, taking extra shifts. You didn't know because I didn't want to burden you with my problems. You were so focused on the Singapore deal. Vivian. Vanessa knew everything. Every doctor's appointment, every bill, every cent of debt I'd accumulated. She said if I didn't leave you immediately, if I tried to contact you or tell you about the baby I was carrying, she would make sure my mother never got treatment. She had connections at every major hospital in the region. She could blacklist us, destroy my mother's credit, make it impossible for us to get care. She was bluffing. Was she? Vivian's voice rose slightly before she caught herself and lowered it again. My mother was dying, Dominic. I couldn't risk it. And Vanessa, she had this look in her eyes. This absolute certainty that she would do exactly what she promised. So I made a choice. My mother's life or our relationship. You should have told me. I could have. What? Fixed it? Thrown money at the problem? That's exactly what Vanessa said you'd do. She said you'd try to save me, that you'd get caught up in the drama, that the scandal would destroy the Singapore deal you'd spent 3 years building. She said your mother would never forgive the disruption. That your board would see it as evidence of instability. Vivian's hands were shaking now, coffee sloshing in her mug. She told me the kindest thing I could do, the most loving thing, was to disappear. Let you think I was a gold digger who got bored and moved on. Let you hate me instead of destroying yourself trying to save me. So I did. I packed up everything. I blocked your number so I wouldn't be tempted to call. I moved to Portland with my mother and got a job under my maiden name. And when Isla was born, her voice broke. When she was born, I held her and I cried because she had your eyes and I knew you'd never see them. The truth she'd been carrying for 7 years sat between them like shattered glass, sharp and irreparable and cutting in every direction. Dominic couldn't speak, couldn't process the magnitude of what had been stolen from them. 6 years of his daughter's life. 7 years of Vivian's presence. All because of a threat made in a parking garage by a woman who was currently planning their engagement party. Why didn't you come back? He finally managed. After your mother recovered. After the threat was over. Because by then you'd moved on. I saw the photos in the society pages. Dominic Ashford and Vanessa Harrington at the Met Gala. The perfect couple. Old money and new success. I thought maybe she'd been right. That you were better off without me dragging you down. That's not. And I was scared. The admission came out barely above a whisper. Scared that you'd hate me for leaving. Scared that you'd take Isla away because you had more money, more power, better lawyers. Scared that I'd lose the only good thing that came from us. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face as 7 years of carefully maintained composure finally cracked. I know I should have told you. I know I robbed you of being her father. Every birthday, every time she asked about her daddy, every time she drew pictures of families with 2 parents, I died a little. But I was trying to protect her. Trying to give her a life free from threats and manipulation and... You were trying to protect me too, Dominic interrupted. From Vanessa. From scandal. From my own mother's machinations. Yes. The word was soaked in relief at being understood. Even after everything, even when I hated you for moving on, I still loved you enough to want you to be happy. Even if that happiness didn't include me. They sat in silence while the truth of it settled around them. This wasn't a story of betrayal after all. It was a story of impossible choices made by someone who loved him enough to sacrifice everything. Including herself. I'm going to destroy her, Dominic said quietly. Vanessa. For what she did to you. To us. To Isla. Don't. Vivian reached across the table and grabbed his hand. Please, Dominic. That's exactly what I was afraid of. You getting consumed by revenge, by anger. Isla doesn't need that. She needs stability. A father who's present, not one who's waging war. She threatened your mother's life. And my mother got treatment. She got 7 more years than the doctors predicted. Vanessa's threat motivated me to fight harder, work longer, find better doctors. In a twisted way, she saved Elena's life by making it precious enough to battle for. Vivian's grip tightened on his hand. Let it go. For Isla. For us. Please. But Dominic couldn't let it go. Not yet. Because while Vivian had been sacrificing everything in Portland, Vanessa had been slowly, methodically positioning herself to take what wasn't hers. And his mother, his own mother, had likely helped orchestrate the whole thing. I need to talk to Isla, he said instead of arguing. I need her to know who I am. What I want to be to her. She will. But slowly. She's 6, Dominic. She doesn't understand complicated adult relationships. Right now you're just the sad man from the wedding. We need to ease her into this. When? Today. This afternoon. We can meet at the park near the motel. Neutral territory. You can spend time with her, let her get to know you as a person before we start using words like father. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough to make up for 6 years of absence. But it was a start. And maybe that's what healing looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic revelations, but small, painful steps toward something better. Okay, Dominic agreed. The park. What time? 2 p.m. There's a playground with swings. She loves the swings. I'll be there. Vivian stood to leave, then hesitated. Dominic? For what it's worth. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of it. For leaving, for not trusting you to protect us, for letting fear make my choices. I'm sorry you missed her first steps and her first words and the way she laughs when she's really happy. I'm sorry I robbed you of being her father when she needed you. You did what you thought you had to do, Dominic said, though the words felt insufficient for the complexity of his emotions. I'm not sure I can forgive you yet. But I understand why you did it. She nodded, accepting that was all he could offer right now, and walked out of the Rusty Spoon. Dominic sat alone in the booth, his coffee growing cold, while the weight of everything settled over him like snow. He'd found his daughter. He'd learned the truth about why Vivian left. And now he had to figure out how to build a relationship with a 6-year-old who didn't know he was her father while simultaneously dismantling the life he'd built with the woman who destroyed them 7 years ago. But Tommy knew more than he was saying. And what he knew could destroy them all. The thought circled back, persistent and troubling. What else was Tommy hiding? And how much worse could this possibly get? The park was smaller than Dominic expected. A patch of worn grass with a rusted swing set, a slide that had seen better days, and a merry-go-round that squeaked when it turned. Children's laughter echoed across the space, mixing with the distant hum of traffic from Route 7. Dominic sat on a bench 20 feet from the playground, watching Vivian push Isla on the swings. The little girl's delighted squeals carried on the afternoon breeze, pure and uncomplicated in a way that made his chest ache. He'd arrived 15 minutes early, unable to stay away. Had spent those minutes memorizing every detail of his daughter from a distance. The way her dark curls bounced with each swing of the arc. How she kicked her legs out at the peak trying to touch the sky. The gap-toothed smile that transformed her entire face. She was beautiful. She was his. And he'd missed 6 years of moments exactly like this one. Vivian said something to Isla, gesturing toward the bench where Dominic sat. Isla's head turned, those familiar brown eyes locking onto him with open curiosity. She hopped off the swing mid-arc, giving Vivian a momentary heart attack based on her expression, and landed with the fearless confidence of a child who'd never learned to doubt her own invincibility. Then she was running toward him, her white sneakers kicking up dust, her stuffed rabbit clutched in one hand. Dominic's heart hammered against his ribs. Hi. Isla skidded to a stop in front of him, slightly breathless. You're the sad man from the fancy castle. Are you still sad? The directness of children. No social filters, no pretense. Just honest observation delivered with the weight of absolute truth. I'm less sad than I was, Dominic managed, his voice rougher than intended. Good. Being sad is yucky. Isla climbed onto the bench beside him without invitation, settling in like they'd known each other for years instead of having exchanged maybe 10 words. Mommy gets sad sometimes. When she thinks I'm sleeping. But I hear her crying in the bathroom. The revelation hit him like a fist to the gut. Vivian crying alone while her daughter slept. 7 years of pain compressed into that single image. Your mommy's very brave, he said carefully. I know. She's the bravest person in the whole world. She fights monsters. Isla swung her legs too short to reach the ground. Not real monsters. The kind that live in your head and make you scared. Mommy says everybody has those monsters, but brave people fight them anyway. Christ. What had Vivian told her? How much did this 6-year-old understand about the impossible situation her mother had been navigating? Vivian approached slowly, giving them space but staying close enough to intervene if needed. She looked nervous, her hands shoved deep in her jacket pockets, her shoulders tight with tension. Isla, sweetheart, this is... Vivian paused, clearly struggling with how to introduce him. This is Dominic. He's an old friend of Mommy's. Do you fight monsters too? Isla asked him. Sometimes. When I have to. Are you good at it? Dominic thought about the past 7 years. The empire he'd built while bleeding internally. The careful control he'd maintained while his heart remained frozen. The way he'd survived by simply refusing to feel anything too deeply. I'm still learning, he admitted. Isla seemed to consider this, her small face serious in that way children get when processing something important. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the edges worn soft from repeated handling. I made you something. At the fancy castle. But you left before I could give it to you. She unfolded the paper carefully, revealing a crayon drawing. Dominic's breath caught. The drawing showed 3 stick figures. On the left, a woman in a blue dress with long brown hair, clearly Vivian. On the right, a tall figure in black with no discernible features except sad eyes. And in the middle, smaller than the others, a little girl with dark curls holding both their hands. Above them, in careful block letters that someone had clearly helped her write, it said, "Families belong together." That's my mommy, Isla pointed to the left figure. And that's me. And that's... She hesitated, glancing at Vivian uncertainly. That's someone you wish could be part of your family? Dominic supplied gently, though his voice was thick with emotion he couldn't quite control. Isla nodded. Mommy says my daddy is far away. But I think maybe he's not that far. Maybe he just doesn't know how to find us. So I draw pictures for him in case he ever comes looking. Mommy says it's important to leave breadcrumbs so people who are lost can find their way home. If you were Dominic, what would you say to her right now? How do you tell a 6-year-old that you're the father she's been drawing pictures for, that you've been looking without knowing what you were searching for, that her breadcrumbs worked? Dominic took the drawing with hands that shook slightly. This is beautiful, Isla. The most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me. Really? More beautiful than fancy cars and big buildings? Much more beautiful. Because it came from you. Isla beamed, that gap-toothed smile bright enough to rival the afternoon sun. You can keep it. I'll make you more. I'm really good at drawing. My teacher says I have artistic vision. I don't know what that means, but it sounds important. It is important. The most important thing. They sat together in comfortable silence for a moment, this man and this little girl who didn't yet know they shared DNA and a last name and a grandmother who taught them both that love was measured in quiet, consistent presence. Vivian cleared her throat softly. Isla, baby, why don't you go play on the slide for a bit? Give Mommy and Dominic a chance to talk. Are you going to kiss him? Isla asked with the bluntness of someone who'd clearly watched too many Disney movies. That's what happens in stories when grown-ups need to talk. No kissing, Vivian said firmly, though color rose in her cheeks. Just actual talking. Boring. But Isla hopped off the bench anyway, clutching her rabbit. Before she ran off, she turned back to Dominic. Will you still be here when I'm done with the slide? The question held more weight than she probably understood. Will you stay this time? Will you disappear like everyone else who promises but doesn't follow through? Yes, Dominic said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. I'll be right here. Satisfied, Isla ran toward the playground. Vivian took her daughter's spot on the bench, maintaining careful distance between them. They watched Isla climb the slide ladder with the intense concentration children bring to physical challenges. She likes you, Vivian said quietly. She doesn't warm up to strangers usually. After Elena got sick, she became more cautious. Less trusting. She's remarkable. She's everything. Vivian's voice cracked slightly. Every good thing I've ever done. Every sacrifice I've made. She's the proof that it was worth it. Dominic wanted to argue, wanted to say that the sacrifice hadn't been worth the cost, that they could have found another way. But looking at Isla healthy and happy and whole, he couldn't find the words to disagree. I'm meeting with my lawyers tomorrow, he said instead. To establish paternity legally. To set up a trust fund for her education, her future. To make sure she has everything she needs. Vivian stiffened. I'm not asking for your money, Dominic. I know. But she's my daughter. Supporting her isn't optional, it's obligation and privilege combined. You've carried that burden alone for 6 years. Let me help carry it now. I need to be part of those conversations. Any decisions about Isla's future, I need to be included. Not informed after the fact, included in the process. Of course, we'll figure this out together. Co-parenting, custody arrangements, all of it. But first, he pulled out his phone, opened his contacts. I need your number. Your real number. Not the one you blocked me on 7 years ago. Vivian rattled off the digits, and he entered them carefully, like they were precious code that could unlock everything they'd lost. There's something else you need to know, Dominic said, pocketing his phone. About Vanessa. About what I'm going to do. Don't. She destroyed 7 years of our lives, Vivian. She threatened your mother. She manipulated both of us into believing lies. And now she's planning our engagement party like she didn't commit fraud and extortion. His jaw clenched. I'm ending it. The engagement, the relationship, all of it. And I'm making sure she never has the power to hurt anyone again. Please think about this. Vanessa's family, they're connected, powerful. If you make an enemy of them. I don't care. The words came out flat, final. I've spent 7 years caring about the wrong things. Building empires while my real life fell apart. That ends now. Isla is my priority. You're my priority. Everything else can burn. Vivian turned to look at him fully, and there was something in her expression he couldn't quite read. Fear, yes. But also something that looked dangerously like hope. I forgot how you get when you've made up your mind, she said softly. That single-minded focus that built Ashford Industries. It's terrifying and comforting at the same time. I'm not the same man I was 7 years ago. Neither am I the same woman. We're both different people now. Shaped by the choices we made and the pain we carried. I don't know if there's a way back to what we were. Then maybe we find a way forward to something new. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility and risk. Isla's shriek of delight cut through the moment. She'd discovered that sliding down backward was infinitely more thrilling than the traditional method. She waved at them from the top of the slide, her smile visible even from 30 feet away. She has your fearlessness, Vivian observed. No sense of danger. Just pure confidence that everything will work out. She has your warmth. Your ability to see the good in people. Let's hope she gets the best of both of us and none of the worst. They watched their daughter play until the sun started its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. And for the first time in 7 years, Dominic felt something unfamiliar and fragile taking root in his chest. It felt dangerously like healing. 7 years ago, on a Tuesday that started like any other, Vanessa Harrington made a choice that would alter the trajectory of multiple lives. She'd been watching Dominic Ashford for months by then. Studying him the way a general studies enemy territory before invasion. She knew his routines, his habits, his weaknesses. She knew he took his coffee black, that he worked late on Thursdays, that he had a standing racquetball game every Sunday morning with his friend Tommy. She also knew he was in love with Vivian Calloway. That was the problem. Vanessa had been bred from birth for one purpose, to marry well. Not for love. Love was a fairy tale for people who couldn't afford better. But for strategic alliance. For the preservation and elevation of family legacy. Her mother had been explicit about expectations from the time Vanessa could walk. Marry someone who matters. Someone whose name opens doors. Someone whose wealth ensures we never have to worry again. The Harrington fortune, built over 4 generations, was crumbling. Her father's bad investments combined with the 2008 financial crisis had gutted their holdings. They were 6 months from losing everything. The properties, the reputation, the carefully curated image of old money stability. They needed a rescue. And Dominic Ashford, with his nouveau riche billions and his desperate need for social legitimacy, was the perfect target. Except for Vivian. Vanessa had investigated her thoroughly. Middle-class background. Event planner. Nice enough, pretty enough, but fundamentally unsuitable for someone of Dominic's stature. She wouldn't understand the social machinations required to move in their circles. She'd be a liability, not an asset. More importantly, she was pregnant. Vanessa had confirmed it through a contact at the medical clinic Vivian visited. 8 weeks along. Not showing yet. Likely hadn't told Dominic yet based on the increased stress markers in her behavior patterns. A pregnant girlfriend was a problem. A pregnant girlfriend who would tie Dominic down with emotional obligations and family drama was an insurmountable obstacle. Unless that obstacle could be removed. The plan had formed over several sleepless nights, refined with each iteration until it was foolproof. Vanessa would approach Vivian privately. Present manufactured evidence of infidelity, easy enough to stage with hired actors and Photoshop. But evidence alone wouldn't be enough. Vivian loved Dominic. She'd fight for their relationship despite proof of betrayal. So Vanessa needed leverage. Real leverage. Elena Calloway's cancer diagnosis provided exactly that. Medical records were surprisingly easy to access with the right connections and enough money. Vanessa learned everything. Stage 2 breast cancer, aggressive treatment required, costs that would bankrupt a middle-class family. Vivian was already drowning in debt trying to manage it privately, not wanting to burden Dominic while he negotiated the Singapore deal. Perfect. The parking garage meeting had gone better than anticipated. Vivian had been appropriately devastated by the fake evidence. But it was the threat to her mother's medical care that broke her completely. The moment Vanessa mentioned having connections at every major hospital, having the power to blacklist Elena from treatment, Vivian's resistance had crumbled. "What do you want?" Vivian had asked, tears streaming down her face. "Leave. Tonight. Don't contact Dominic. Don't tell him about the baby. Disappear completely. Let him believe you were just another gold digger who got bored and moved on. He'll never believe that. He knows me. He knows the version of you that you've shown him. But people believe what makes sense to them." A young woman from a struggling background, suddenly faced with the reality of medical debt and an unplanned pregnancy? It's not hard to imagine her cutting her losses and running. Men like Dominic, they're used to being disappointed. He'll believe it because part of him already expects it. Vivian had looked at her with such profound sadness that Vanessa almost felt something resembling guilt. Almost. "If I do this, if I leave, you'll make sure my mother gets treatment? Everything she needs. I'll make sure she's taken care of. You have my word." The word of someone who's blackmailing me is supposed to be comforting? The word of someone who keeps her promises. "I'm many things, Vivian, but I'm not a liar. Your mother will receive treatment. You'll disappear. And Dominic will move on to someone more suitable. Someone like you. Yes, someone like me." Vanessa had kept her word. An anonymous donation had covered Elena's treatment costs, funneled through enough shell corporations that it couldn't be traced back. She'd monitored the situation for months afterward, ensuring Vivian stayed gone and that Elena received the care promised. It had been a clean operation. Efficient. Effective. Except Vivian had been pregnant. And that child, that little girl with Dominic's unmistakable features, was now a living, breathing piece of evidence that could destroy everything Vanessa had built. In the present day, Vanessa stood in her penthouse bathroom, gripping the marble vanity hard enough that her knuckles went white. She'd recognized Vivian instantly at the wedding. Had watched Dominic's face transform when he saw her. Had known, with sick certainty, that everything was about to unravel. She'd worked too hard. Sacrificed too much. Spent 18 months cultivating the perfect image of the perfect fiancé. The engagement party invitations were sent. The society pages were already speculating about wedding dates. Her mother had been dropping hints about grandchildren. Vanessa was not going to lose this. She pulled out her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Miss Harrington," the voice on the other end answered promptly. "Richard Morrison, her family's lawyer for 20 years. Ruthless, expensive, and utterly loyal to whoever paid his retainer. I need you to prepare documentation for an emergency custody petition. Unfit mother, unsuitable living conditions, financial instability. All the standard arguments. Against whom? Vivian Calloway. And her daughter Isla. I'll send you the details within the hour." Pause. "May I ask what grounds you have for such a petition? You're not related to the child and without standing." "I'm engaged to the child's father. That gives me standing. And if the mother can be proven unfit, custody transfers to the father, who will, naturally, defer to his future wife's judgment on parenting matters. That's an aggressive strategy, Miss Harrington. If the father contests, he won't. Not once he understands what's at stake. His company's reputation. His board's confidence. The scandal of an illegitimate child emerging after 7 years. He'll see that the cleanest solution is to remove the mother from the equation and raise the child in a stable, respectable environment. And if he doesn't see it that way?" Vanessa's smile was sharp enough to cut. "Then I'll make sure he does. I've done it before. I can do it again." She ended the call and composed a text to Dominic. "We need to talk. Tonight. My place. It's urgent." Then she poured herself a glass of wine and waited. Because Vanessa Harrington always had a plan. And she always won. Dominic didn't go to Vanessa's penthouse that night. He went to see his mother instead. Margaret Ashford lived in a sprawling estate in Connecticut, 30 acres of perfectly manicured grounds surrounding a house that could generously be called a mansion and accurately be called a monument to excess. She'd built her real estate empire from nothing, turning a small inheritance into billions through calculated risks and ruthless negotiation. She'd raised Dominic the same way she ran her business, with clear expectations and measurable outcomes. Love had never factored into the equation. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, showed him to his mother's study without comment. She'd been with the family for 20 years and had mastered the art of seeing everything while appearing to notice nothing. Margaret sat behind her desk, reviewing contracts even at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. She was 63 but looked 50, maintained through careful diet, regular exercise, and probably some discreet cosmetic work she'd never admit to. Her silver hair was styled in a sleek bob, and she wore a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She didn't look up when Dominic entered. "You've been avoiding my calls," she said, making a notation on the contract in front of her with a fountain pen that had belonged to her father. "I've been busy." "Too busy for your engagement party planning?" Vanessa's mother is asking questions. "I've been making excuses, but my patience has limits." "Cancel the party." That made her look up. Her blue eyes, the same shade as his though colder, narrowed slightly. "Excuse me?" "Cancel the party. Cancel the engagement. I'm ending it with Vanessa." Margaret set down her pen with deliberate precision. "Has something happened that I should know about?" "You mean besides the fact that I just discovered I have a 6-year-old daughter that my fiancé threatened into hiding 7 years ago?" The words landed like grenades in the tastefully decorated study. To her credit, Margaret's expression barely changed. Just a slight tightening around her eyes, a momentary stillness that suggested rapid mental calculation. "I see," she said finally. "And where did you acquire this information?" "From Vivian. The woman I was in love with 7 years ago. The woman who disappeared without explanation because Vanessa threatened her mother's medical care if she didn't leave." "That's quite an accusation." "It's the truth." "Truth is subjective, Dominic. Especially from women who have something to gain by disrupting your current relationship." The dismissiveness in her tone ignited something cold and furious in Dominic's chest. "You knew, didn't you? You knew what Vanessa did." "I knew the Harrington family was experiencing financial difficulties 7 years ago. I knew that Vanessa was a suitable match for you in ways that your event planner girlfriend was not. I knew that the Singapore deal was at a critical juncture and couldn't afford emotional disruption." Margaret picked up her pen again as if the conversation was already concluded. What Vanessa did or didn't do to facilitate a necessary separation is irrelevant. She threatened to kill an innocent woman by denying her cancer treatment. She provided the treatment. I made sure of it. The money was funneled through proper channels. Elena Calloway received excellent care, better than she could have afforded on her own. Everyone benefited from the arrangement. The casual admission knocked the breath from Dominic's lungs. "You helped her," he said slowly, each word carefully controlled. "You helped Vanessa drive Vivian away. You financed the threat. I facilitated a solution to a problem that would have derailed your career and damaged this family's reputation. You were young, infatuated, about to make a disastrous decision that would have haunted you for decades. I protected you. You stole 6 years of my daughter's life from me. I saved you from a mediocre existence." Margaret's composure cracked slightly, her voice rising. "Do you have any idea what your life would have been? Married to some middle-class nobody, trapped by an unplanned pregnancy, watching your potential die slowly while you played house? You built an empire, Dominic. You became someone who matters. You're welcome." The distance between who his mother was and who he'd believed her to be yawned open like a chasm. He'd known she was calculating. Knew she prioritized success over sentiment. But this was something else entirely. This was sociopathy dressed up as maternal protection. "I have a daughter," Dominic said quietly, dangerously. "Her name is Isla. She's 6 years old. She likes drawing and swings and stuffed rabbits. And she spent every day of her life without a father because you decided that your definition of success mattered more than my right to know she existed. You'll have access to the child now. Set up proper custody arrangements. Provide financial support. Be a father if you must. But don't throw away everything we've built for some misguided notion of romance with a woman who abandoned you. She didn't abandon me. She was threatened into leaving by people I should have been able to trust. Trust. Margaret laughed, the sound brittle. Trust is for people who can afford weakness. We can't. The Ashford name means something. It opens doors. It commands respect. And it requires constant vigilance to maintain. Vivian Calloway threatens that. Her daughter threatens that. Unless they're managed properly. Managed. The word tasted like poison. She's my daughter. Not a PR problem to be managed. Everything is a PR problem when you're at our level. The sooner you remember that, the better. Dominic stood, his decision crystallizing into diamond-hard certainty. I'm done, he said. With Vanessa. With your machinations. With pretending that any of this. He gestured at the opulent study, the contracts, the monument to success his mother had built, matters more than the people I love. If you walk away from Vanessa now, the scandal will destroy your board's confidence. They'll question your judgment. Your competitors will smell blood. The Singapore expansion could collapse. Then let it collapse. I'll build something new. Something that isn't founded on lies and manipulation and stolen years. He walked toward the door, each step feeling like shedding weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Dominic. His mother's voice stopped him at the threshold. When he turned, her expression had shifted into something almost human, almost regretful. I did what I thought was best. What any mother would do to protect her son's future. No, Dominic said. You did what was best for the empire you built. I was just another asset to be deployed strategically. But I'm not an asset, Mother. I'm a person. And I'm choosing to be human instead of successful. You'll regret this. Maybe. But I'll regret it as myself, not as whoever you've been trying to turn me into. He left without looking back. Mrs. Chun was waiting in the foyer with his coat, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes warm with something that might have been approval. Good luck, Mr. Ashford, she said quietly, handing him the coat. Some things are worth fighting for. Even if no one else understands. Thank you, Mrs. Chin. Outside the night was cold and clear. Stars visible despite the light pollution from nearby Hartford. Dominic stood on the steps of his childhood home and breathed in air that tasted like freedom. His phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Where are you? We need to talk. No. He blocked her number and called Tommy instead. I need to move fast, Dominic said when Tommy answered. Tomorrow morning. I want Vanessa removed from any access to my finances, my properties, my company. I want the engagement ended officially with public statement prepared. And I want a full forensic audit of any interactions she's had with the Harrington family lawyers regarding custody petitions. That's a lot to accomplish overnight. That's why I pay you the big bucks. Can you do it? Pause. Then, yeah, I can do it. But Dom? This is going to get ugly. It's already ugly. I'm just making sure it's ugly on my terms. He ended the call and looked up at the mansion behind him. His mother was visible through the study window, back at her desk, already moving on to the next contract as if their conversation had been nothing more than a minor interruption. Maybe she was right. Maybe he would regret this. Maybe walking away from Vanessa and the carefully constructed life he'd built would destroy everything. But when he thought about Isla's drawing, those 3 stick figures holding hands, the careful block letters spelling out families belong together, he knew exactly which future he wanted. And it wasn't the one his mother had planned. The DNA test results arrived at 2:30 a.m. Dominic was in his home office, hadn't slept, had been pacing for hours while Tommy worked through the night handling the logistics of dismantling a relationship that had never been real. The email notification chimed and his heart stopped. Subject, paternity test results, confidential. His hand shook as he clicked open the attachment. Medical jargon filled the screen, percentages and genetic markers that meant nothing until the very last line. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. He was a father. Officially. Scientifically. Irrevocably. The truth crashed over him in waves. 6 years of first steps he'd missed. First words. First days of school. First nightmares comforted by someone else. First questions about why she didn't have a daddy like other kids. All stolen. All gone. All irretrievable. But there would be more firsts. More moments. More chances to be present, to be worthy of the gift he'd been given even if he'd arrived 6 years late. Dominic pulled up the photo on his phone, the one he'd taken at the park when Isla wasn't looking. She was mid-laugh, her head thrown back, her dark curls catching sunlight. Pure joy captured in pixels. His daughter. He'd spent 7 years building an empire. Now he'd spend the rest of his life building a family. His phone rang. Tommy. It's done, Tommy said without preamble. Vanessa's been removed from all accounts. The engagement announcement is ready to go out first thing tomorrow. And you were right about the custody petition. Morrison filed preliminary paperwork this afternoon. Emergency hearing scheduled for Friday. On what grounds? Unfit mother. Unsuitable living conditions. Financial instability. The usual nuclear option when someone wants to rip a kid away from their parent. Rage, white-hot and consuming, flooded Dominic's system. Vanessa wasn't just trying to hide her crimes. She was trying to weaponize the legal system to separate Isla from Vivian. Get me the best family law attorney in the state, Dominic said. Money's no object. I want Vivian protected. I want this petition destroyed. And I want documentation of every threat Vanessa ever made, every manipulation, every piece of fraud. Already on it. But Dom? This gets public tomorrow. Once you release that engagement statement, Vanessa's going to come at you with everything she has. She's not going to go quietly. Good. Let her fight. Because I'm done being the collateral damage in other people's schemes. After he hung up, Dominic pulled out the drawing Isla had given him. He smoothed it carefully on his desk, those 3 stick figures holding hands, and for the first time in 7 years, he let himself cry. Not the controlled, private tears he'd shed alone, but real, gasping, broken sobs for everything that had been lost and everything that might still be saved. He was a father. He missed 6 years. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that Vanessa was already making her move, and the battle for his daughter was just beginning. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, you're not alone. Sometimes the truth we uncover changes everything, but it's what we do with that truth that defines us. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens when Vanessa's final play unfolds, because this war is far from over. The legal papers arrived at 9:43 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic as he handed them to Vivian outside room 108. She'd been carrying 2 cups of coffee from the motel's lobby. One for herself, one for her mother, when the man in the cheap suit approached with his clipboard and manila envelope. Vivian Calloway? Yes. You've been served. He thrust the envelope into her free hand and walked away quickly, as if proximity to whatever was inside might contaminate him. Vivian stood frozen in the parking lot, coffee growing cold in her hands, staring at the envelope like it might explode. She knew what it was before she opened it. Had known this was coming the moment she'd seen Vanessa's face at the wedding, that calculating coldness that promised retribution. But knowing didn't make it easier when she finally tore open the envelope and read the words printed in legal jargon that boiled down to one simple, devastating message. Emergency custody petition. Hearing scheduled for Friday, 2 days away. Allegations of unfit living conditions, financial instability, inadequate care. A request for immediate temporary custody to be granted to the child's father, Dominic Ashford, pending full evaluation. The coffee slipped from her hands, both cups hitting the asphalt and splashing brown liquid across her shoes. She didn't notice. This is every mother's worst nightmare. Not the fear of physical danger, but the terror of having your child legally ripped away by people with more money, more power, more everything. How far would you go to protect your child? What wouldn't you sacrifice? Vivian had already sacrificed 7 years. She'd thought that was enough. She was wrong. Inside room 108, Elena was sitting up in bed, doing a crossword puzzle with the kind of intense concentration that suggested she was fighting to stay present, to keep her mind sharp even as her body betrayed her. She looked up when Vivian entered, and whatever she saw in her daughter's face made the pen fall from her fingers. What happened? Vivian couldn't speak. Just handed her mother the papers and sank onto the edge of the bed, her entire body trembling. Elena read in silence, her lips pressing into a thin line. When she finished, she set the papers aside and pulled Vivian into her arms the way she had when Vivian was small and the world felt too big and scary. We'll fight this, Elena said, though her voice was weak, already tired from the small effort of sitting up. We'll get a lawyer. We'll show the judge that you're a good mother, that Isla is loved and cared for. With what money, Mom? I have $1,700 in my checking account. Vanessa's family has generations of wealth and connections. They've probably already spoken to the judge, greased the right palms, ensured the outcome before the hearing even starts. Then we call Dominic. He'll help. He wouldn't let this happen. He's the one listed as petitioning for custody. His name is right there on the papers. Elena grabbed the documents again, scanning more carefully. That's the legal language they have to use. But Vanessa filed this. You can see her lawyer's name. Dominic doesn't know. Call him. Tell him what's happening. Vivian wanted to believe that. Wanted to trust that the man who'd held Isla's drawing like it was made of spun gold wouldn't be part of a plan to take her daughter away. But she'd been betrayed before. Had learned that people with power used it regardless of who got hurt in the process. Her phone rang. Dominic. She stared at the screen, fear and hope warring in her chest. Elena squeezed her hand. Answer it. Vivian pressed accept with shaking fingers. Hello. Don't panic. Dominic's voice was steady, controlled, but underneath she could hear fury barely contained. I just found out about the custody petition. It's not from me. Vanessa filed it using my name without authorization. My lawyers are already working to have it thrown out. The relief that flooded through her was so intense it left her lightheaded. You didn't? You're not trying to take her? Never. Not without your consent, not without a plan we build together. Isla needs her mother. She needs you. And anyone who tries to separate you is going to have to go through me first. Vivian pressed her free hand to her mouth, holding back a sob. Elena rubbed circles on her back, steady and comforting. The hearing is Friday, Vivian managed. That's 48 hours. Can your lawyers actually stop this in time? They're the best in the state. They'll file an emergency motion to dismiss based on fraudulent filing. But Vivian, there's something else you need to know. What? There's a charity gala tonight. The Grayson Foundation event. Vanessa will be there. So will half of New York's social elite, including judges, lawyers, and people who influence public opinion. His voice dropped, dangerous and determined. I'm going to end this. Publicly. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what she did and who she really is. Dominic, no. If you humiliate her publicly, she'll come after us even harder. People like Vanessa don't accept defeat, they escalate. She's already escalated. She filed false custody papers. She's trying to steal our daughter through legal manipulation. There's no higher escalation than that. He paused. I need to do this, Vivian. Not just for us. For everyone else she might hurt in the future. She needs to face consequences. Vivian understood the impulse. The burning need for justice, for public acknowledgement of private wrongs. But she also understood the cost. Just, be careful. Please. Isla can't lose both of us. She won't lose anyone. I promise you that. After they hung up, Vivian sat with her mother in the quiet motel room, both of them understanding that everything was about to change. Either Dominic would succeed in destroying Vanessa's credibility, or Vanessa would destroy them first. There was no middle ground anymore. Where's Isla? Elena asked softly. At the park with Mrs. Patterson from next door. She's teaching her to braid dandelion chains. Vivian managed a weak smile. Isla has no idea any of this is happening. I want to keep it that way for as long as possible. You're a good mother. The best. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. I let her grow up without a father because I was too scared to fight. You kept her safe. That's what mothers do. We make impossible choices with incomplete information and pray we chose right. Elena's hand, thin and fragile, covered Vivian's. You chose right. Isla is healthy, happy, loved. That's all that matters. But as Vivian looked at the legal papers spread across the faded motel bedspread, she wondered if love would be enough. The Grayson Foundation Gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum, transforming the classical halls into a playground for New York's wealthiest and most influential. Women in designer gowns worth more than cars glided past sculptures that had survived millennia. Men in tuxedos negotiated deals between sips of champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's monthly rent. Dominic arrived alone, deliberately late, letting the event settle into comfortable rhythm before he disrupted it. Vanessa spotted him immediately. She was holding court near the impressionist wing, surrounded by admirers in a silver gown that caught every light. When their eyes met across the crowd, her smile was triumphant, predatory. She thought she'd won. She thought the custody papers and the legal maneuvering and the weight of her family's influence would crush any resistance. She thought Dominic would see the inevitable outcome and negotiate quietly, privately, like civilized people did. She'd badly miscalculated. Dominic walked toward her with measured steps, and something in his expression made conversations falter. People sensed the shift in atmosphere, that electric charge that preceded storms. Dominic, darling? Vanessa's voice was bright, performative. I was beginning to think you weren't coming. Everyone's been asking about the engagement party plans. There won't be an engagement party. His voice carried, cutting through the ambient music and polite chatter. There won't be an engagement. Because as of this moment, whatever arrangement we had is over. The conversations around them died completely. Heads turned. Phones discreetly emerged from evening bags, ready to capture whatever came next. Vanessa's smile froze. Dominic, this isn't the place. No, this is exactly the place. Because you made it public when you filed false custody papers using my name. You made it public when you decided to weaponize the legal system against an innocent woman and her child. So now I'm making it public too. I have no idea what you're talking about. But her eyes darted around the growing crowd, calculating, searching for escape routes. 7 years ago you threatened Vivian Calloway, the woman I loved, the woman who was carrying my child, and forced her to disappear. You told her you'd destroy her mother's access to medical care if she didn't leave. You manufactured evidence of infidelity that never happened. You manipulated both of us into believing lies so you could position yourself as the suitable match. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's face went pale beneath her makeup. That's a disgusting accusation. It's the truth. I have proof. Recordings of your lawyer filing the custody petition without my authorization. Bank records showing your family's financial crisis 7 years ago and the convenient anonymous donation that saved you. Testimony from the process server you hired to stage fake evidence. Dominic took a step closer and Vanessa stepped back, her composure cracking. You stole 7 years from me. You kept me from my daughter. You terrorized a woman whose only crime was loving me. This ends now. You can't prove any of that. But her voice shook, betraying the lie. Actually, I can. My lawyers have compiled everything. By tomorrow morning, it'll be filed with the court. By tomorrow afternoon, it'll be in every newspaper. Your reputation, your family's reputation, everything you were so desperate to protect, will be destroyed. Vanessa's mask shattered completely. Her face contorted with rage and desperation, her voice rising to a shriek that echoed through the museum's marble halls. You think you can humiliate me? You think you can throw me away like garbage after everything I did to make you acceptable? You were nobody. New money, no connections, no social graces. I made you into someone people respected. You made me into someone I despised, Dominic said quietly. Someone who valued appearances over truth. Someone who could ignore love because it wasn't convenient. You didn't make me better, Vanessa. You made me complicit in your cruelty. She lunged at him then, all elegance abandoned, her fists striking his chest ineffectively while security moved in. You'll regret this. My family will destroy you. We'll take everything, your company, your reputation, your precious daughter. Security guards gently but firmly pulled her away, her threats dissolving into incoherent screaming as they escorted her through the crowd toward the exit. The assembled guests stood in shocked silence for a moment before the whispers began. A rising tide of speculation and judgment that would dominate social circles for months. Dominic didn't stay to hear it. He walked out through a side entrance into the cool night air and called Vivian. It's done, he said when she answered. Vanessa won't be a problem anymore. On the other end he heard her exhale, a long shaking breath that might have been relief or delayed shock. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for fighting for us. Always, Dominic promised. For as long as you'll let me. The call came at 2:17 a.m. Vivian's voice was broken, barely coherent through tears. It's my mom. The hospital called. We need to come now. She's asking for you. For all of us. Dominic was in his car within minutes, picking up Vivian and a sleepy, confused Isla from the motel. They drove to Hartford General in heavy silence, Isla curled in the back seat clutching her rabbit, asking questions nobody wanted to answer. Is Grandma okay? Grandma's very sick, sweetheart, Vivian said, her voice carefully controlled. We're going to see her. Will she get better? The silence that followed answered what words couldn't. Elena was in a private room, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed, tracking the final journey of a body that had fought as long as it could. Her skin had taken on a translucent quality, as if she were already halfway between worlds. But when they entered, her eyes opened. Still bright, still aware, still Elena despite everything the cancer had stolen. There's my girls, she whispered, and her smile was genuine even though the effort of producing it clearly cost her. Isla climbed onto the bed carefully, nestling against her grandmother's side like she had dozens of times before. Hi, Grandma. I missed you. Missed you too, baby girl. So much. Elena's hand, fragile as paper, stroked Isla's hair. You've been good for Mommy? Wow. We made friends with a nice man. He's really tall and he likes my drawings. Elena's eyes found Dominic, standing uncertainly near the door. Come here, she said. Don't hover like a stranger. You're family now. He approached the bed, this woman he'd barely known but who had shaped the woman he loved. Mrs. Calloway? Elena. Please. We're past formalities. She studied him with eyes that saw too much. You found them. I'm glad. I prayed you would, but I wasn't sure prayers worked for situations this complicated. I should have found them sooner. I should have fought harder 7 years ago. Should-haves don't matter now. What matters is what you do next. Elena's breathing was labored, each word requiring visible effort. Take care of my girls. Be the man I know you are. Not the man others want you to be, the man you choose to be. That's what matters. I will. I promise. Good. Elena turned her attention to Vivian, who was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. Baby, don't cry. This isn't sad. I got to see you find love again. I got to meet my granddaughter's father. I got 7 years the doctor said I wouldn't have. That's not tragedy, that's gift. I'm not ready to lose you, Vivian choked out. Nobody's ever ready. But you're strong. Stronger than you know. You raised a beautiful daughter alone. You survived when I wasn't sure you would. You'll survive this too. Elena's hand found Vivian's. And you won't be alone this time. You have Dominic. You have family. Let them help carry you. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. So much. More than all the stars. Elena's eyes were closing now, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Isla, sweetheart? Yes, Grandma? Be brave. Be kind. And remember that Grandma loves you to the moon and back. I love you too, Grandma. Are you going to sleep now? Yes, sweetheart. A long, peaceful sleep. Will you wake up? Elena's smile was infinitely gentle. Not in the way you mean. But I'll be in every sunset you see, every flower that blooms, every time you feel loved and safe. That's how angels work. We become part of the beautiful things. Isla considered this with the seriousness children bring to concepts they don't fully understand but somehow accept. So you'll be an angel? The very best kind. They sat together in the quiet hospital room, machines beeping their steady rhythm, until Elena's breathing changed, slowed, softened, and finally at 3:41 a.m. stopped. The machines screamed their alarms, but the nurses who rushed and moved with respectful efficiency, already knowing there was nothing to be done except honor the passing. Isla looked up at Vivian, her eyes wide and solemn. Is Grandma an angel now? Vivian pulled her daughter close, burying her face in those dark curls while her body shook with sobs. Dominic's arm came around both of them, solid and steady, and for the first time in 7 years, Vivian let herself lean into someone else's strength. Yes, baby, she whispered. Grandma's an angel now. They talked for hours afterward, sitting in a diner that was open all night, while Isla slept in the booth beside them, her head pillowed on Vivian's lap. Vivian told him everything. Every sacrifice she'd made, every tear she'd cried, every moment she'd wanted to call but hadn't. The nights she'd walked past his building just to be close. The times she'd Googled his name and seen photos of him with Vanessa, wondering if she'd made the wrong choice. The guilt that had eaten at her every time Isla asked about her father. Dominic listened without interrupting, letting 7 years of pain spill out like poison from a wound. When she finished, her voice was hoarse and her coffee long cold. He took her hands across the table. I should have known, he said. I should have trusted us enough to question when you left. Should have fought harder, looked deeper, refused to believe you'd just abandon what we had. You didn't know because I made sure you couldn't. I erased myself completely. Changed my number, blocked you everywhere, used my maiden name. I made it impossible for you to find me because I thought I was protecting you. Vivian's eyes filled with fresh tears. But I was protecting myself too. From the possibility that you'd choose your empire over us. That Vanessa was right about you prioritizing success. She was right. Back then she was right. I was so focused on building something that mattered that I forgot the people who actually mattered. His grip tightened on her hands. But I'm not that man anymore. The empire can burn. The board can revolt. The Singapore deal can collapse. None of it means anything compared to you and Isla. You don't have to choose between family and success. Yes, I do. Because for too long I chose success. Now I'm choosing family. Choosing you. Choosing to be the father Isla deserves and the partner you need. If that means walking away from Ashford Industries, I'll do it without hesitation. They sat in silence, the weight of everything said and unsaid settling between them. Outside the diner windows, dawn was breaking, soft pink light spreading across the horizon like hope made visible. I don't know if we can go back to what we were, Vivian finally said. 7 years is a long time. We're different people now. Then we'll go forward to something new. Something better. Built on truth instead of manipulation. On trust instead of fear. Dominic brought her hands to his lips, pressing kisses to her knuckles. I love you, Vivian. I never stopped. Even when I tried to convince myself I'd moved on, even when I was planning a future with someone else, you were the ghost haunting every empty space in my life. I love you too. God help me, I never stopped either. They cried together then, finally, mourning everything they'd lost while tentatively reaching for everything they might still have. 3 days later, they sat together in the same park where Isla had given Dominic her drawing. The custody hearing had been dismissed that morning, Vanessa's lawyers withdrawing the petition after the fraud came to light. But there was still one more truth that needed telling. Isla sat between them on the bench, swinging her legs and humming a song she'd learned at school. Isla, sweetheart, Vivian began carefully, we need to talk to you about something important. Am I in trouble? No, baby. Not at all. But, do you know what a daddy is? Isla's expression turned thoughtful. Someone who loves you and keeps you safe. Like mommies do, but different. Dominic's heart clenched. That's exactly right. And Isla, I want to be that for you. Your daddy. If you'll let me. The little girl looked between them, confusion written across her face. But my daddy is far away. Mommy said. I was wrong, sweetheart, Vivian interrupted gently. Your daddy wasn't far away. He just didn't know where to find us. But he found us now. And he's right here. Understanding dawned slowly in Isla's eyes. She studied Dominic's face with new intensity, cataloging features she'd probably noticed without understanding their significance. You have my eyes, she whispered. Does that mean we match? Dominic couldn't speak past the emotion choking his throat. Could only nod while tears streamed down his face. Yes, sweetheart, he finally managed. We match. Isla reached out and took his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his large ones. Does this mean you'll stay? You won't go far away? I'm never leaving. Not ever. I promise you that. Good. She smiled that gap-toothed smile that made his chest ache. Because I've been saving drawings for you. I have a whole box under my bed. And I have so many questions. Like, can you teach me to ride a bike? And do you like ice cream? And can we get a puppy? Dominic laughed through his tears, pulling his daughter, into his arms. Yes to all of it. Bike riding and ice cream, and we'll talk about the puppy. Vivian joined the embrace, and they sat together on that park bench while the sun set and the world kept turning and a family that had been broken found its way to wholeness. 6 months later, everything had changed. Dominic had restructured Ashford Industries, appointing Tommy as CEO while he took a step back to focus on what actually mattered. He'd sold the penthouse and bought a house in Connecticut with a yard big enough for Isla to run wild. There was a swing set he'd installed himself, a garden where Vivian grew vegetables, and a spare room they were slowly converting into an art studio for Isla's endless drawings. Vivian had started her own event planning company. Small, specialized, focused on intimate celebrations rather than corporate extravagance. She worked from home most days and they'd fallen into comfortable routines. Morning coffee while Isla got ready for school. Family dinners every night. Bedtime stories that usually involved Dominic making up increasingly ridiculous adventures. They were healing. Slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. On a Saturday in October, Dominic took Vivian to the botanical garden where they'd had their first date 10 years ago. The same bench where he'd kissed her for the first time. The same path where she told him she loved him. Isla was with Tommy for the afternoon, probably convincing him to buy her excessive amounts of candy. Why did you bring me here? Vivian asked, though she knew. Could see it in the nervous energy he was trying to hide. Because this is where it started. Where I fell in love with you. And I thought. He dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. I thought it was the right place to ask if you'd let it start again. Properly this time. No lies, no manipulation, no empires getting in the way. Just us. Just family. Vivian was crying before he even opened the box. Vivian Calloway, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I choose you, every single day, above everything else? Yes, she sobbed. Yes, of course, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, simple, elegant, nothing like the ostentatious diamond he'd given Vanessa. This was just for them. They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at the garden. Just close friends and family. Isla served as flower girl, taking her duties with utmost seriousness. She wore a white dress with purple ribbons and carried a basket of petals she scattered with artistic flair. When Dominic and Vivian kissed as husband and wife, Isla cheered loudest of all. At the small reception afterward, Isla cornered Tommy with the intensity of a child on a mission. "Uncle Tommy," she whispered conspiratorially, "do you think they'll give me a baby brother?" Tommy nearly choked on his champagne. "That's, a question for your parents, kiddo. But you're good at knowing things. Mommy says you're the smartest person she knows." "Your mommy is very kind, but this is beyond my expertise." Isla sighed dramatically. "Fine. I'll ask them in the comments." Tommy laughed, not understanding the reference but charmed by her determination. "You do that, sweetheart." Dominic watched from across the room, his wife in his arms, his daughter scheming with his best friend, and felt something he hadn't felt in 7 years. Complete. 7 years. That's how long it took to find their way back. But some loves, they never really end. They just wait for the right moment to begin again. This family fought for their second chance. If this story touched you, if it made you believe in love that survives despite everything trying to destroy it, subscribe to see what comes next. Because every ending is just a new beginning. And their story? It's far from over.